the role of narrative media. It's an honor to have all of you here as we explore a topic that lies at the intersection of psychology, storytelling, and well-being. The way in which narrative media can shape our emotional and mental landscapes. Our speaker today, Catherine A. Marple, from Department of Media and Information at Michigan State University, will guide us through an engaging and insightful discussion. She will examine how narrative experiences, particularly through film and media, influence our mental habits, helping us reframe emotions and develop healthier modes of thinking. Before we begin, it is my privilege to invite for today's program to inaugurate the program our respected Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Drupajyoti Chattopadhyay, to inaugurate the program. Sir, please.
Thank you very much. Dear students, I'm sure that all of you are excited to listen to the speaker who is going to deliver a talk on this, the role of media in mental health. One of the most important reasons is she actually is from media, theater acting, and now she is doing PhD in the area of mental health. So the combination of these two are something which have become very, very important. So what we want to listen from her regarding this particular topic and how she actually looks at it. And let's give a big hand to our main speaker. We have two other participants who are actually our faculty members for Japanese language. And thank you for being with us today. And we are really happy that you are going to share whatever you had in your mind. And the most important thing is that we have with us our international coordinator, Professor Ananda Mitra, who is actually helping us to get the different people from the different parts of the world. And today already we had one very important session in the morning. Professor Mitra, you are here and you are going to moderate this session. So we are really very, who is actually from the professor in media from Wake Forest University. And he is actually trying to help this particular audience to moderate this particular session so that it can be a real interactive one. So dear students, it's only possible if you react on it, what actually the speakers want to say. And I don't want to waste any more time, but request Professor Mitra to come over and actually start to moderate this particular session and introduce the speakers also. Professor Mitra, please.
Sir has already introduced Dr. Mitra, but I would just like a formal introduction. We are privileged to be joined by Professor Dr. Ananda Mitra, whose academic contributions have shaped critical understanding in the fields of communication and media studies, with PhD in communication from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Mitra's research focuses on Champaign. So sorry. Dr. Mitra's research focuses on the intersection of technology, interaction, particularly in the realm of social media and digital narratives. Professor Mitra, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Adrita. Thank you for doing this. Thank you, VC sir, for a nice introduction to this session. Here's how you're going to run it. I'm going to invite to the stage the three panelists and our primary speaker, Catherine Marple. Can I tell you the name by which I choose to call you? Catherine, I call her Cassie. I've known Cassie for years now. She came to Kolkata with us, with me, from Wake Forest on a scholarship several years ago. So Cassie, I'm going to call you up here, and I'm going to call our two visitors from Japan to come up here, and of course the head of the Department of Psychology. Please come up here so we can set up the stage. So as our panelists are taking their seats, I just want to say a couple of words about the people who will be up on the stage right now. If I can turn my phone back on. Well, I don't need my phone. So we have, you already heard a little bit about who Cassie is and what she does. Our panelists here represent, not only they represent two different nations, third being the US with Cassie. We have here two people from Japan, and you are a person who has one of the most challenging work one can think of, teaching children with special needs. You do that, right? And we'll hear more about that when you come up and speak. Sir, you have the responsibility of teaching children. That's it. And you start with this high and go to this high, right? Exactly. And that's also a very difficult task. And ma'am, I wanted to tell you this story before when we were standing out there. How many of you have heard of a character called the Unabomber? Anybody know the name Unabomber? Sorry, it's Shannon, you'll know it, right? So Unabomber was sort of an individual terrorist, and he was sending bombs. I want to say this is in the 80s, right? He was sending bombs to different people. Every bomb that he sent had a handwritten letter. And it is through the analysis of handwriting, graphology, which is one of your areas, which is fascinating, that the Unabomber was identified and eventually apprehended. And Cassie, you'll know this. The handwriting expert on that, who worked with the FBI as a consultant, was Dr. Randy Rogan, one of my colleagues. So without any more, the game plan is I'm going to invite Cassie to give her talk. You got 30 minutes. At 35 minutes, I'll cut off the microphone. And after that, I'm going to invite the panelists to come up. And then after the talks are over, we're going to do this. Shannon has agreed to stay back for this part. I'm not going to bother you. I know you're tired. You've got off the plane a couple of days back. But I'm going to call on you after the talks are over to say a few words. All right? That's our game plan. Thank you. Okay. Do you want to? So how does that? Okay. All right. So the conversation that just happened was about the felicitation, which is an important part of the ceremony, and I missed that. I'm sorry, Adita. So without any further ado, Cassie, floor's yours.
Okay. Let's see here. Hello, friends. How's it going? All right, glad to hear that, glad to hear that. All right, so I'm working with the handheld microphone. I'm going to attempt not to gesture too much. Little known fact about Americans, we're actually all from somewhere else. You know, America's only 250 years old, so my dad's side of the family immigrated from Ireland about 200 years ago. My mom's side of the family immigrated from Italy about 100 years ago. And the Italians and the Irish are the two people groups who are most known for big gestures. So I'm doomed when it comes to handheld microphones, but I will do my best. So, another thing about Americans that seems to be a really big stereotype is that we don't like our parents because we move out when we're 18. I have literally got this question verbatim twice So, excuse me, ma'am, is it true that in America you hate your parents because you move out when you're 18? There's a little bit more context to it than that, but it's very true that there are some substantial cultural differences. For example, my understanding is that here, if you move out when you're 18, that is a sign of disrespect to your parents. In America, if you don't move out when you're 18, it's a sign of disrespect to your parents. So the reason why this is all relevant to stories is okay, let's just get a show of hands here. Has anyone ever heard of this movie? Nice, love it. Do you? Okay, cool. Okay, so this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love this crowd. I love you all already. All right, so one of the things that's a really big theme in Ye Giovanni, Hey Giovanni is family and people's relationship to their family, or more specifically, another way of putting it, how people see their family, their interpretation of what's going on in relation to their family. So, for example, the amazing Deepika starts out the story, she loves her family, but she's not quite satisfied with where she is in life. So the way she's seeing her family, the way she's seeing herself and her spot in life, she's not quite happy with it. There's not a feeling of contentment. She's not in a state of well-being. Compare that to the second half of the movie where we have that absolutely amazing sunset scene. Can I get a show of hands for everyone who loves the sunset scene? Thank you, appreciate that. Where her interpretation is different. She's a few years older, a few years wiser, has some more experiences, and the way that she's still living with her family. She's still essentially in the same position that she was at the beginning of the movie, but her feelings about where she's at are different. She's happy. She's contented. Something about how she sees her situation has changed. Now, let's bring this back to stories. So I'm an American. I watched this movie in America. And obviously there are some big cultural differences in what we experience with family. But somehow, when I was watching this movie, I was transported into a different world. I was transported into a world where what Deepika's character sees is normal. I felt the things that Deepika's character was feeling, both at the beginning and at the end. Because when you think about it, that's the beautiful thing about stories, isn't it? We're all minds, people, souls, a whole life's worth of experiences trapped inside of our own heads. And there's so many other heads out there. Every single one of you out there is an entire person with an entire history. Every single one of us, we're all people trapped inside minds, and we can never know what it's like to see the world from someone else's eyes, from someone else's perspective. But through stories, we can. Stories are one of the only spaces where you can actually get, for that little space of time, for that 3 hours, live in someone else's world and see what they see and feel what they feel and interpret their situations from a different way than we normally would. Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, you see, it's the Italian thing, it's doomed. I'm doomed. Yeah, okay. Well, actually, so if I just do this, is this better? Can y'all hear me in the back? All right, love it. Okay, we're just gonna go right up. Okay, we got this. So, what are we talking about today? When we talk about mental health, there's something of a stigma associated with mental health. Let's own it. So, if you have, mental health is something that you work with when you have problems. But there's also this idea of well-being. What does it mean to be contented? What does it mean to be happy? And mental health is every bit as much about that. And what we're talking about today is, what does it mean to see a situation in a way that facilitates contentment, happiness, well-being? What are the mental skills that get us to that state of being? And how can stories get there? So the focus of my research and what we're going to be talking about today is basically this: how we see situations influences how we feel about those situations. Stories allow us to experience different ways of seeing situations. And because of that, stories can help us practice healthier ways of seeing. So let's dig into this a little bit. So we have a lot of psychology students in the house today. Can I get a big cheer from all the psychology students in the house? Love it, love it. I got the chance to talk with some of you just before the talk. Y'all have interesting research ideas. We really need to talk more after all this is done. But so again, this is something most of you are probably familiar with, but my main area of research is reappraisal. So I focus on emotion and emotional experiences and what are the perceptions and the cognitions that influence our emotional experiences. So a little bit of theory here. What we're working with is reappraisal theory. And basically, it's asking, what does it mean to see a situation in a particular way that leads us to feel a particular way? And it says that, and this is a vast simplification, so I apologize to all the reappraisal scholars who are probably would be very sad if they could hear this, but the vast simplification of reappraisal theory is that emotion comes from two places. One, there's what we care about in a situation. And two, there's how we appraise the situation. So a simple example of this is snake. Primal, very, very primal. You know, lizard brain right here. So when we see a snake, you know, what's the thing that, so let's say I'm walking along the road and then all of a sudden a snake drops down right in front of me from a tree branch. Now, what do I care about here? Well, one of the things that we all kind of primarily care about is this little thing called staying alive. We kind of all like that a little bit. So I care about staying alive. Now, appraisals. What do we mean by appraisals? We mean our assessment of a particular event and its implications for the thing we care about. So if a snake drops down right in front of me, I might have the automatic appraisal, this is poisonous. If this bites me, I am going to die. And you remember, I don't really want to die, strangely enough. So that combination of appraisals leads to this emotion that we call, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die, or fear. So that raises the question, what if the snake is not actually poisonous? In that case, if I don't know that the snake is poisonous, I'm still gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. But I might not actually be about to die. So that's where the space of reappraisal comes in. So a lot of clinical work aims at identifying habits of appraising situations in slightly inaccurate ways. You know, this snake is not actually going to kill me. And so if I'm reacting to it, if I'm appraising it as though it is going to kill me, I'm having an emotional reaction that doesn't match the situation. So how do we get to the point where our mental habits can change? How do you go about changing your automatic way of appraising a situation? And that right there, changing that mental habit of how we're appraising, you know, what goal we're focusing on, our assessment of how something is going to impact us, that is the key focus of a lot of therapy. So bringing this back to, say, Deepika's situation, what does appraisal look like outside the context of, you know, snakes and death and very, very primal things? Well, what Deepika's appraising here, in this sense, is her place in life. Is she happy with her place in life? And we can dig into this a little bit. Dr. Mitra is very serious when he says he's going to turn off the microphone if I go over, so I'm going to go ahead and move on because I think I've been taking a bit of time. So bringing us back to the core focus of this particular lecture, And that is, what role do stories play here? How do stories impact reappraisal? Now, like I mentioned, this is where my research lies. So I'm going to go over a research study that a couple of colleagues and I were recently doing. And this is on Devil Wears Prada, which is very fun. We also recently won an award from one of the biggest conferences in the entire discipline, so that was pretty cool. But, so basically, this study, louder? Oh, my gosh, I still need to talk louder. Okay, so this study focuses on Devil Wears Prada. Now, I know the reaction to this is probably not going to be quite as big as Ye Jawani Hey Diwani, because what really does top Ye Jawani Hey Diwani? But has anyone seen Devil Wears Prada? Okay, we got a solid number of hands here. Well, the gist of Devil Wears Prada is as follows. It actually deals with similar ideas. It has a lot to do with family and where we came from. And you have a character, Andy, and she's from a very conventional culture. So, everyone thinks that everyone in America is like Friends. Not everyone in America is like Friends. We actually have a bunch of areas in the country that are quite culturally conservative. So they're very, similar to what you would experience in a culturally conservative Hindu household, for example. And so that's the type of household that Andy's from. She's, good local Desi hometown values. And she moves to New York. And she wants to be a journalist, but she gets the only job she can get right out of college is in Runway, fashion magazine. The world of Runway is entirely different from what she's used to. So she begins slowly to adopt the norms of this other world that she's entered for work, and that starts to cause conflict with her friends and family. So then she ends up in a series of situations where she has to choose, which of these worlds do I pick? So the point of all of this is we wanted to figure out, what is the story doing that gets us sucked into this world? So I don't know about you, but for me, I don't know anything about high fashion culture. Like when I watch this movie, I don't get it. I have no idea why anyone would spend 5 lakhs on a purse. Why would you do that? There's so many other things you could spend that on. But that's that world. Again, thinking about this in terms of appraisal, what does that mean? What are the two things that lead to emotion? There's what we care about, and then there's our assessment of how the things that are happening affect the things that we're caring about. So basically what this tells us, my reaction here, why the heck would you spend 5 lakhs on a purse? This makes no sense. What's going on here? What that indicates is that this world in the story, this runway fashion world, is very different from my world. They are appraising things in a way that I would not appraise them. And in a way also that the character Andy does not appraise them. And this shows up in a couple of different ways. We conducted 5 focus groups and 12 interviews. People were paid, which was really nice. We had a pretty diverse sample. So we had people watch Devil Wears Prada. And we talked with them about what the characters saw as normal and their reactions to what characters saw as normal. And a couple of interesting things came out. The biggest thing that came out was very closely tied to reappraisal. And that was what people cared about was very different in the world of the story from what most of the participants cared about. And that showed up by how the characters were appraising events. So for example, for those of you who have seen Devil Wears Prada, you remember that classic opening where Miranda comes in for the first time. I'm seeing some grins there. Yep, yep, you know what I'm talking about. So there's a classic scene where Miranda, who's the absolute, she's the boss. She is the boss. Everyone's absolutely terrified of her. She comes in for the first time, and everyone absolutely freaks out. Like Emily Blunt's character's like, no, she's coming early. This is horrible. This is horrible. This is horrible. Everyone's freaking out. Everyone's running around and trying to get everything just in time. And Andy is standing there going, what the heck is the big deal? Someone's coming into work. So you'll notice there a difference in emotional reaction. So one person is like, snake, I'm gonna die. The other person's like, well, it's not poisonous. What's going on here? So two different worlds. Then what starts to happen over the course of the story is that Andy, our main character, she starts to feel like the people in this runway group are feeling. So there's another scene where, she's like, there was a python headband. There was a crisis in the accessories department. I had to go find a python headband, and that's why I couldn't meet with you today. And her friends are like, oh, what? So again, difference in appraisal. She's gotten to the point where a python headband is the end of the world. Snake, I'm gonna die! Her friends are still at the point where, why the heck do you care about a python headband? Who cares? So difference in what they care about and difference in appraisal. And then, as we get further along into the story, Andy starts making these choices where there are these two different ways of seeing things, and she starts prioritizing the original way of seeing things. And I won't give any spoilers, but the important thing here is that what happened to the audience members. So again, what's normal in the story world was conveyed by what the characters care about and how they emotionally react to the situation, how they appraise the situation. The interesting thing is that participants did not agree at all with the runway people. But in discussions where they were trying to figure out, was Andy right or wrong? Were the runway people right or wrong? Were the friend group right or wrong? They didn't react the way they would normally react. They didn't appraise the situation in the way that they would normally appraise the situation. Rather, they appraised the situation the way the runway group would appraise the situation. They started saying things like, well, of course she couldn't make it to the meeting. I mean, the python headband. Of course she needed to find the python headband. And these are regular people, just viewers like you or me who know nothing about runway. They were in interviews saying things like, well, yeah, I think the friends overreacted because, of course, Andy needed to go get the python headband because, the python headband is important. So think about that for a minute. A normal human being who has no idea what the heck a python headband is, suddenly, after that 2-hour experience, is saying, yeah, no, I actually kind of get why you would sacrifice all of this stuff for a python headband. So think about that. There's something going on in that experience, in seeing this world of the story, this world of runway, this world where all of a sudden certain bags are so important that yes, you would pay 5 lakhs for them. A python headband is so important that yes, you would absolutely sacrifice an evening with your friends in order to find it. That yes, that snake is right there and it will kill you and you will react as though it will kill you. Something about being in that story for that space of time left something in the participants' minds. And that is what we're talking about. So this is a little bit about my dissertation, or my thesis, and I won't talk about this too much, but the gist of it is, the thing that I really want to leave you all with today about the research is that stories create worlds that we enter when we watch a movie. And a world is a way of seeing a situation. The runway group in Devil Wears Prada was a world that we enter when we watch that movie. And it's different from our own. And people care about different things, and they see things in different ways. And to the extent that we are sucked into that story world, we care about what they care about. And we see things the way they see things. And when we leave that story experience, that leaves something in our minds. there's a trace of that experience somewhere in our memory that potentially can influence how we see similar situations in the future. That's where most of my research focuses, on the memory side of things. If you want me to talk more about memory, let me know. I'm happy to follow up with that in questions. I do? Oh, perfect, because I do have more slides. So let's bring this back to practical. So let's bring this back actually to Deepika really quickly, to Ye Jawani, He Jawani. So again, back to what we talked about at the beginning. So no, it's not the case that all Americans hate our parents because we move out when we're 18. But I will say, I personally, my relationship with my parents developed as a function of having watched Ye Jawani, He Jawani. Because there is a certain culture in parts of the United States that says if you're not able to do things without your parents' help, there's something wrong with you. You know, if you're not able to figure out how to find a flat without your parents' help, if you're not able to do this without your parents' help, if you're not able to do that, there's something wrong with you. That is something that in certain parts of the United States we hear a lot. And that was something that had shaped my relationship with my parents. I love my parents. We have always been incredibly close, but I didn't always reach out to them when I could have used their help. So watching Ye Jawani, He Jawani, going through that vicarious journey with Deepika, that left something in my mind. And it wasn't just this. It was multiple stories, actually many of them Bollywood films. I'm not going to lie, many of them Bollywood films. It's becoming transported into a world where it's normal to ask your parents for help. Where it's not appraised as something, where the appraisal is not, oh, there's something wrong with you. You're asking your parents for help. You can't do it on your own. But rather the appraisal is, yeah, it's normal. Why wouldn't you? To be immersed in that appraisal left something in my mind. And I do ask my parents for help more than I did. And my feelings about asking my parents for help are far happier, far more contented than they used to be. So bringing it all together, do I have time or are you about to turn off my microphone? One more slide. Okay, I have one more slide. All right. I'm actually going to go to clinical practice. So really quickly about practical implications. So there are a few different directions that I'm going with practical implications, and a lot of them I'm actually doing in collaboration with Adrita here at SNU and with Dr. Dasgupta sir. So a lot of this research and kind of where the research is going is happening in collaboration with SNU. And if any of you would like to be involved in some way, please reach out to us. So there's a clinical practice bent, but the thing that Adrita and I and Dr. Dasgupta sir and I are working on is this idea of looking at changing the narrative of how we talk about media effects. Because let's face it, this generation, us young people, we are in a different world. This is an unprecedented time in human history. To an unprecedented degree, our environments are made up of media. So the influences on how we think, on how we see, on our habits of perception, on our habits of appraisal, on the goals that we focus on the things that we care about, to an unprecedented degree, the source of these influences are from media. And so there's value in bringing this into conversation, in intentionally talking about, let's not just watch whatever the algorithm happens to give us and let the effects fall where they may. There's value in creating a culture of agency in how we talk about media effects, in how we choose what we watch, and thinking about this is the way that I want to feel. I want to feel contentment. I want to have this type of relationship with my parents. I want to have these mental habits. How can I intentionally select the story worlds that I'm becoming transported into to support these types of mental changes, to support these types of mental habits? So that is where I'll leave it so that Dr. Mitra, sir, doesn't turn off my microphone. Thank you all so much. You are an amazing audience.
Thank you, Cassie. Thought-provoking. I've got a lot of questions, but I'd like now to invite any one of you who wants to go first. Do you want to use this mic? That's fine. Yeah. The hope now and the expectation is we'll hear your points of view and some responses to what Cassie has said. So turn it over back to you. You take it in turns.
Hello again. Hello. I am Natsu from Japan, and thank you for your insightful talk today. You know, I am teacher in Japan as well, and that helps me as teacher and also to my students in Japan. Yeah, so I appreciate. And in Japanese schools, students face several pressure, academic pressure, social pressures that limit their emotional expressions as well. And sometimes that make it hard to think their station in healthy way. So I think your suggestion about reappraisal, yeah, the seeing through new eyes, it skill they truly need, I think, but it is rarely taught directly. But in Japan, the anime, manga, and films are working as a teacher instead of me. So the stories of overcoming hardship, inspire them. So they make the situation to think in different light. So yeah, we can use the media at our classes intentionally. So I will try to use them as a co-worker, the media as a co-worker. And yeah, so yeah, that matches your point of vicarious experience. I think they can see their own challenges in different lights. So yeah. But we can use media not just for entertainment, but to foster reappraisal and emotional growth. Yeah. Thank you very much for your various talk. Thank you.
こんにちは。Hi. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm very happy because I study a lot of. Okay, sorry. So I'm Japanese. So Japanese animation often have deep theme, not only fun. So, for example, in sports anime like Haikyuu, do you know Haikyuu? Yeah, Haikyuu. Okay. Okay, thank you. We see a hero stand up after failure. It can make us think about our own effort and challenge. And in fantasy anime like One Piece, do you know One Piece? One Piece is the and red wear and wearing hat. So we see friends work together to overcome big problems. This shows us the importance of friendship and trust. In everyday life anime, we can feel the small happiness in daily life and the warmth of human connection. So in today's talk, that the idea of reprisal connected with these experience. When we see a character's view change in the story, we can also think about our own problems in a new way. This new way of think can stay in our mind and slowly change our action in the future. For me, media is not only for fun. It can give me energy when I am sad, my mind to new idea, and give me courage to try something new. That is why I want to choose media with a purpose, not just to pass time, but to help me grow as person. Yeah, thank you for your, thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation, ma'am. Very, very well articulated. So you talked about reappraisal. Before going straight into the reappraisal, we need to know that in 1984, Lazarus stated a theory of appraisal theory of emotion, which stated that if we encounter any stimulus, any situation, any event, first thing is primary appraisal, that is interpreting the situation. So suppose I am in a park, and seeing one cute puppy. So it's a very cute thing, and I'm very happy. Just string is there, so it's a neutral. But if it's a snake, as you mentioned, then I will restore to harm, threat, or challenge. Then the next part is the secondary appraisal. Secondary appraisal means whether I have adequate coping strategy or not. That is not reappraisal. Before that, secondary appraisal. For me, it would be I can run or not. Okay? If I can run, just run. So this is the secondary appraisal, whether I have a coping strategy or not. Then I came back. That became my life story. I talked with my parents, friends, and they stated that some snakes are poisonous, some are not. Then that becomes my reappraisal cognition. So the next time, if I see a snake, then I can reinterpret the situation, whether it's a poisonous or not. Then I can move ahead. So that is a reappraisal. Just given a very wonderful explanation with the stories and everything. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists. You're not done yet. I'm going to come back to all of you. Uh, I am, guys, can you hear me in the back? Are you interested in hearing me in the back? Okay. So this was quite interesting, Cassie. I would like to begin the conversation, particularly what you said. I was thinking about that quite a bit. By no means am I trained in psychology or in mental health. I am trained in media. And one of the things that strikes me, particularly with what you also said, that media has traditionally been a source of entertainment, right? And that's how we always look at it. What I think what we are doing here is reappraising media and its consumption patterns. And with you, ma'am, you mentioned some of the traditional, or not the traditional, the contemporary Japanese media, anime and so forth and so on, which you present it as a Japanese medium, but you well recognize that this is now becoming international. It's all over. Anime is caught on. People over here are watching anime, and all, K-pop is another example. Cassie, you bring us to a point, and here I bring in my background in media. I think there's always been, and for my media students over here, this should make sense. There's always been a great deal of emphasis on media effects. Simply speaking, Gerbner and all, when they did the violence study back in UNC Chapel Hill, their question basically was this: if somebody watches a lot of violence on television, what is the likelihood that when they get angry, they will slap somebody? So that, in a very simple nutshell, was the question that was being asked. They were appraising. So we didn't have the appraisal language in those days because psychology and communication wasn't talking to each other. What it is demonstrating is the international and the interdisciplinary. So my question for you is, where does this fit in mental health management? That is what you are concerned with, right? Mental health management. What do I do? What do I tell these young kids who in a city like Kota, where we have tons of training centers, and they're under pressure to perform in these exams, and suicides go up? That's an outcome of mental health issues. What happens when kids are stuck with their phones and they're losing the connection with the family? What is your research telling us? Maybe it's not telling anything yet, but where does this fit in with mental health management that you can picture in the future?
So thank you so much for that question. And I also appreciate, ma'am, for highlighting the difference between the primal and the secondary appraisals. When I said I was vastly oversimplifying appraisal theory, this is what I meant. The person who knows is right here. So thank you for providing more context about that. I truly appreciate it. So 2 answers to your question, sir. One of them is on the research side, and one of them is on the practical application side. So you talked about media effects. And so I'm going to nerd out and do a little bit of research talk at the moment. So the academic tradition of media psychology tends to be very focused on, historically, it came from a perspective where we thought about media effects as, one of the words for it is a hypodermic needle. You know, you watch media and it has an effect on you, and that's the end of the story. So people have moved away from that. There's more of an emphasis on the psychological processes, but that framework is still there. When we talk about the effects of media, we're still talking about it as though the media user, the media consumer, is essentially a passive agent. You know, we watch a movie and it goes through these psychological processes and leaves something in our minds. That's the way that a lot of media psychology tends to talk about this research, about these effects. So part of the goal of what we're doing here at SNU and the research study that Nivedita and I are heading up is to change the narrative around this research, to change the conversation from just you have a stimulus and you have psychological processes and they have an effect, to change that to, okay, and then how can the people who are being affected go all the way back to the beginning and intentionally select media so that all of those down-the-road psychological processes can have the effect that they want to have? And that brings us to the practical side of this research, which is, like I talked about at the very end, media is a bigger part of our worlds than it has ever been before. Like, our social worlds are mediated. The worlds that we exist in are mediated, especially post-COVID. For the first time, post-COVID, people are consuming far more media than they have before. And in COVID, because of the space that COVID put us in, it became a habit. It became normal. And some of those habits have carried through. So that's why this idea of intentional media selection, of facilitating a sense of agency in media users, is such an important practical part of research and what strategies research should be facilitating moving forward. Does that answer your question, sir?
I'm good.
Cool.
I have one question.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, ma'am, in this fast life, okay, we are now seeing the videos in 2x speed, okay? We lack time sometimes, okay? So in this immediate gratification of life, this era, so how can media be designed in such a way that can help this delayed gratification or patience or something like that? How can it be designed like that or repressure?
Okay, that's actually a really interesting question. And there are kind of two ways of thinking about this question. And this is all at the interface between research and practical application. So a few of you who I was talking to just before the lecture began, we were talking about, do you want to go more into clinical practice or do you want to go more into research? A couple of people were interested in the relationship between media and mental health and research. So this is kind of if you're interested in that space between all three, this is potentially an area to think about. So there are kind of two ways of approaching research on the relationship between media and mental health. One is from what we'd call a human-computer interaction perspective. So it's from the perspective of how can we as researchers work with the designers of technologies to help them make those technologies more conducive to mental health. So for example, Nivedita, a lot of her research focuses on apps and has a lot of implications for app designers, people who are doing telehealth, mental health apps. And so that's one way of going about research on this. How do we, what information can we give to designers to help them design things in a better way? A couple of the people who I work with at Michigan State University work with the Hollywood industry. To find ways of building, positive messaging into content. So that's one kind of big category. Another category is working directly with media users. And so that's saying, yes, we can try to affect Hollywood. We can try to affect what Pixar is doing. We can try to affect what the mental health app creators are doing. But that's kind of a big undertaking, and it's not a given that they're going to listen to us. So that's important work to do, but are there also things that we can do directly with the users? Are there things that users can do, even if you don't have control? So even if you, sitting right there in the red dress, even if you don't have any impact, even if you don't have any power over what the producers in Hollywood decide to put into their next movie, is there a way that you can still determine what the effect of your media consumption is going to be? So those are kind of the two umbrellas of research on these practical applications. So it sounds like your question is kind of focused more on the first umbrella. Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with kind of representations. Like there's a lot of research on representation of positive media use or positive, basically modeling of positive habits, modeling of reappraisal. There's also growing interest in research on the effects of immersive experiences. But that is a whole area of research. Mine tends to focus on the second. But if you would like to talk more about the first one, I can, well, okay. I'll turn it back over to you.
Follow-ups? Follow-up questions? Yes, I'm coming to the audience in 1 second. I just want to say, yeah, that's fantastic. That's what we need. There is one thing that I do want to say, because there is a group of ages in this room. And as I sit here and listen to, I'm thinking about what you're saying, media has changed so radically from the times when the way we thought about media. Dr. Dasgupta sitting in the back, it's his work with media, my work with media. You guys are much more into media choice, which did not happen in the past. That's a point that we need to think about a little bit more as we think about. With that, I'm going to bring this back right to the audience. You had the first question. Should I take this microphone over there?
Hey, Cassie. It's a fantastic presentation, and it's wonderful. And I learned quite a bit. Now I have two questions for you. One is plain and simple. What are the indicators or parameters that are normally used to measure the role of media narratives on mental health? That's one. And number two, I was thinking of something called a collective reappraisal. of an entire community, an entire society. Especially, it hit me here when you spoke about COVID. So we might have things like COVID, we might have things like economic downturns. So can media narrative or media framing be done in such a manner that it will help the society cope with the pandemic or with maybe a downturn? What kind of manner in which the media can help in societal reappraisal, collective reappraisal?
Those are such interesting questions. Thank you, sir. So to your first one, which, if I hear you correctly, it's basically what are the indicators, like how do we identify when media is impacting mental health metrics? Yeah. So that's a great question. So a couple of answers to this. One is, this is a very new area of research. And this is important for those of you who are interested, potentially, in going into research and who are interested in the relationship between media and mental health. So there's a lot of research existing on how portrayals of mental illness in media impact people's perceptions of mental illness. So there are ways of measuring that. That's very well established. There are also, overall, surveys of if you watch more media, are you more depressed? Are you less depressed? Are there similarities or differences in terms of genre, that sort of thing. But this area of how psychologically does the process of becoming immersed in a world change your goals, your what you care about in a situation, how you perceive a situation. This is a brand new area of research. To the best of my knowledge, and to the best of the knowledge at my advisors at Michigan State, which is, again, one of the best institutions for this type of research in the entire world, this is the first time research has been done on this relationship. So this is a brand new area of study, which means that we are actively in the process of trying to figure out, how do you go about measuring this stuff? How do you go about, measuring, does exposure to one story impact your appraisals? Does exposure to multiple stories? How do we measure that? And that was actually another part of the research project that we were doing, was trying to identify textual indicators of appraisals in content. And so the biggest one, just to wrap up, because like Dr. Mitra said, I do talk too much. The biggest one is called the cultivation analysis. We're trying to adapt a cultivation analysis, and that is basically, you take people who watch a lot of media. So like for, let's say, people who watch, like Americans who watch a lot of Bollywood films versus Americans who don't watch a lot of Bollywood films. And then you would do a study measuring how do they appraise asking parents for help. And if there's a big, substantial difference between the two groups, and if the difference is bigger for heavy viewers, for people who watch a lot of Bollywood, compared to viewers who watch not so much Bollywood, then there's an indicator that something is happening here. And then that's obviously a vast oversimplification, but that's one approach. I could talk about this far more, but to the second one. Oh, wrap. Okay. Sorry, sir.
I will get to your question in just a second. Talking about media, we have a person in the room, our visitor, our guest from Wake Forest, who does media in a slightly different way in terms of technology. In some ways, AI is becoming a new media. So I wanted to invite you just a few words, and then I'll come to your question, sir. Is that okay? Shannon. Can you give me a mic?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting comment. I think, AI is a new media, and people are using it the same way they use social media. Some people are using it for new insights, new perspectives, and some people are using it to reinforce existing perspectives. I think that's the big opportunity, agency that the user has in how they, as you said, Cassie, how are they identifying the media they want to watch, and then how are they intentionally reflecting on it to see if it's something that they are reinforcing existing beliefs or using it to explore new opportunities. Great area of research. Totally agree. Thank you.
When you speak about the collective, reappraisal, please. Collective reappraisal type of collective reappraisal.
That you didn't answer. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to try to answer very quickly because I would really love for us to have some time for student questions as well. I got to talk with you a little bit, but I'd like to talk with you more. So, quick thing with collective reappraisal. Short answer, that's a great question. I'm a psychologist, not a sociologist, and so my answer is probably not going to be very satisfactory. But cultivation theory originally did start as a sociological theory. It was if people watch a certain type of content quite a bit, the prediction is most people who are watching that content are going to start to have similar ideas about how something is. So it gets a little bit complicated because there's so much choice. To Dr. Mitro's point, there's so much choice now. And so that makes it difficult for media to have a consistent effect across a very large group of people. But yes, fundamentally, the core, again, so I was talking very briefly about memory structures. The core memory structures and the effects of media on memory, originally speaking, research was looking at that at a sociological level. And so while the media landscape has changed, there is a very strong connection between this idea of exposure to media, cumulative exposure to media, and collective values and collective perceptions about how things are. The classic example being how likely, for people who watch more crime news, how likely are you to think that if I leave the house, I'm going to get robbed or something? So there is research on that, so thank you for highlighting that.
I'll take just a few. I think I'll take the cue from Shannon. It's about AI. AI in the future. So that's, I perceive like a snake. And my perception is based on the observation of the eminent British physicist, Stephen Hawking, who was, as we all know, who was paralyzed from neck downwards and had to depend on gadgets. He has, in his essays, said that when the AI becomes real, it will create a mental health issue because the humans are going to feel have that inferiority sense, inferiority complex, that there is something, and it would actually kill human innovation. So once media takes it up, do you think it will really be like a snake?
Interesting. So just to make sure I'm understanding, so that we'll sort of be, are you asking about our appraisals of AI? Okay, interesting. And how media is impacting our appraisals of AI? Okay, that is such an interesting question. I'm actually teaching a class on that as we speak. So I'm teaching for Michigan State online asynchronous this semester. And does anyone here know the series The Black Mirror? Okay, yeah, so I'm teaching a course on the Black Mirror, and it's designed to help people think through the implications of developing technologies using narrative as a way to think through these implications. And so we just got through our section on AI, and it was so fascinating seeing students' responses to that, because it's an interesting space where I would agree with you. I think after going through that set of weeks on AI, we all ended up a little shell-shocked. Granted, Black Mirror has a tendency to just shell-shock people in general, but yes, I think there is indeed a very substantial danger that we're going to get a little bit immobilized, as it were, by AI. But that's a whole conversation. So yeah, I would love to talk with you more about that. Yeah. But yeah, if it would be possible for me to pull the presenter card and say, can we get some questions from, okay, so students. Yeah. There's a student.
Hello.
Student.
Today we have been discussing media and the role of media, but strangely, the people who deal with media, the reporters on the ground, they are a very important component of this whole study. And we have not touched that per se. So I would like to, my question is mainly for Anindita and also Cassie. For example, this Ahmedabad plane crash that happened recently, it's a very traumatizing incident. And it so happened that when Patna plane crash happened, I was on spot visit. I did the coverage. So I had to go to the family of the two deceased air hostess and I had to talk to their parents. And this time when it happened, I could not go through the visuals again because it happened in 2000. In 2025, I still carry a trauma of what I saw and did and how when I interviewed those people, how they reacted and all of that. So that role it is also kindly taken up, like while you're in your discourses, that like something like a vicarious trauma that we carry, or a long-term trauma that we carry, and how media can help us also, and also we can personally cope while dealing with media, because we still deal with media. That's the point.
Interesting. Yeah, if you would. And also, very quickly, I saw that there was a student who had her hand up and she stood up. So if we don't have time for your question, please come up to me afterwards. And again, for any students, if you have questions that we did not have time to get to, please come up to me afterwards. I will stick around for a while so we can have a conversation.
Yes, very good question, sir, and pertinent too. So as a psychologist, we always focus that we have certain cognition, thinking process and emotion, and what you are experiencing. That gives you a story or cognitive schema, and it acts as a trigger for the next thing. So we need to train a media person in such a way that emotion has to be there, emotion will be there. So we can, whenever I am doing something, like I am interviewing some person who are having such traumatic incident, we empathize with them definitely. But at the same time, as therapists, we set boundaries also. So that is a learning process, sir. We need to learn how to take boundaries, how to create a boundary, and how to not get affected with that. And burnout, how to handle that, how to manage our stress, and how to manage our own health, well-being, mental healthy, to be mental healthy so that I can help others. So that is also very important. We need to work on that.
No, that was beautiful. That makes complete sense.
So first, I want to say that I really love the topic of your research. It's something that I've been interested in for a long time. But I wanted to ask that it's something that I've noticed that media used to be a platform for people to express themselves. However, of late, it's become more of a way for people to figure out a formula that makes them go viral. So when such is the case, does the agency of people really matter when they're being fed mindless content where people are only focused on going viral rather than self-expression?
That is really interesting. Also, if you are interested in this area of research, please do come up and talk afterwards. So yeah, that was a really good question. I would love to talk with you more about this. So this is a very interesting question and area. So my research is a little bit more on narrative media and a little bit less on social media. But I mean, social media is one of the most essential areas of research because I mean, it's a lot of what our media environments consist of. And I think the thing that you identified, I think a lot of this goes back to that idea of creating more of a culture of agency in media consumption. Because think about it. So back in the day, so let's compare this to like diet and exercise. So back in the day, when we're just, struggling to survive and, you eat whatever you can get, it's not really a question of, should I eat this type of food? Should I eat that type of food? Do I exercise on a regular basis? Those type of questions are not even there. When you only have one television channel, the type of question of, okay, should I watch this or should I watch that? That's not even there. So, but the environment has changed. When you get to a point where, okay, now I could buy anything in the grocery store, what do I buy? I could eat this or I could eat that. What do I eat? I don't have to be physically active. Do I build a way to be physically active into my day? Now, all of a sudden, since the environment has changed, we're in a space where we have to make intentional choices about these things. And if we don't create a culture of actually talking about these choices, like, okay, I could eat this or I could eat that, I enjoy eating that more, so I'm just going to go for it. I don't have to be active. Being active kind of sucks, so I'm just going to, sit at the computer all day. If we don't actively think about these things, then we're not able to healthily adapt to the new environment. So I think that is an excellent analogy for where we're at with media. The media environment has changed. We are now in a situation where we have a lot of choice, and we can just, as it were, sit back in the chair all day and do nothing. So I think we need to have a similar shift to what happened in the food conversation, where we start to talk more about taking agency in our media diet, to thinking about what does it actually look like to have a healthy media diet, and what practical steps do we take to get there. So I think, again, from a sociological perspective, I think this is one of the most important conversations that we as researchers can facilitate in the next couple of decades. So thank you for your question.
Hello, ma'am. As a psychology student, after this conversation, I just arrive a question in my mind. That is, what can psychology student do today to contribute positively to media portrayal of mental health?
Sorry, can you say that one more time? I'm hard of hearing.
What can psychology students do to
Contribute
positively
to media portrayal of mental health.
media portrayal of
Oh, okay. That is an excellent question. That is an excellent question. And again, I think, I forgot, were you one of the people who was interested in research? I know we talked. Yeah, you were my research person over on that side, I remember. So this is an active area of research. There are people who are doing content analyses on how media is portrayed. And so in terms of what specifically you as students can do, number one is on the research side, if you want to get involved in research like this, there's a way to do that. Like, you can reach out to professors who are doing this type of research and like express your interest, ask if there's anything you can do to help. Like, generally speaking, there's always space for another research assistant. So that's one way that you can get involved in that research. If you wanted to do your own research in this area as well, a content analysis, it doesn't require IRB approval, so this is potentially something that you could do on your own as well. In addition, just in terms of, as psychology students, what can you do? In terms of social media, I mean, at this point, you know things. Like, to the point where, like, to the extent that you learn things about mental health and that you have research-based insights about these things, share them. And again, I think that goes back to this idea of creating a conversation around, media diet. Like, how do we actually do that? To some extent, it needs people to start the conversation. It involves people actually talking about, okay, so here's what I'm learning. Here's some ways that we could, what does it look like to actually intentionally select media in a particular way? So I think the more that people start just talking about this, talking about agential selection, I mean, when it comes down to it, that's the most essential thing to start changing the conversation. So I love that question. Thank you so much.
Okay. So as a psychology student, what we can do is our body posture is very important. Our motor neuron and mirror neuron gets activated after seeing someone. So if someone is saying during COVID time that COVID cases are increasing and there are 3 death cases like that, that is a news. and someone says like states like that, media sometimes states, it's increasing number of COVID and 3 are already dead, and it can be you. So it's always create a terror. Okay, so as a psychology student, we always, or as a psychology person, we always stay calm, relax, and see what is other people are saying, and we spread happiness, we spread calmness, and we need to be with each other, and we have to be very mentally strong that yes, if the negative event is there, we can handle it. That optimism and hope has to be there. Thank you.
Nice. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. I want to share something that we often hear our parents and the elders express their concern about how much time we're spending on social media. So, from a psychological point of view, how can we actually tell the difference between just regular healthy use and when it starts becoming an addiction or harmful for us?
That is such a good question. Do you have thoughts on? Okay, cool. I'll try to talk very quickly so you can have space to talk as well. So this is such a good question. And I think this also goes back to the research project that Adrita and Dr. Dasgupta sir and I are working on this summer. And that is looking at what is the existing conversation around media use and well-being. And the interesting thing is, just initial findings, initial thoughts. We still need to collect more data on this. But at this point, the conversation does not quite match the place that the media environment has evolved to. Because, so like, again, let's go back to the analogy of comparing food, comparing exercise, comparing physical health. You know, back in the day, when it's more of a question of just, okay, now there are sugary foods available. How much sugary food do I eat? You know, that's one thing. That's one thing. But now, everything's a lot more complicated. It's not just a question of, okay, there's this new type of food out there. How much of it do we eat? There are all sorts of types of food, and sugar is integrated in all sorts of things in different ways. It's just far more complex. And so that question of, okay, just sheer amount, it doesn't matter what the content is, just sheer amount, that's what matters. It isn't quite reflecting the fact that people's environments are now mediated, and that's not going to go away. And so what we're thinking is that the conversation, or part of the way that the conversation needs to shift, is away from this rhetoric of the thing that matters is how much media you're consuming. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still is going to have the same effect. And this also goes back to the importance of research in this area and making research accessible, because in order to make informed choices, in order to contribute conversation that's not just how much media am I consuming, but what media, and is it having good effects or is it having bad effects, what type of effects, we need to help people understand how media as a and how to figure out what your media environment, what your diet is likely, what effect it's likely to have. And so I think that's a very good question, and it highlights both a direction for future research and a direction for how we need to shape the conversation around media use and well-being. So thank you for that.
Okay, I'm just giving her answer in a very brief way. So how you will see that whether it's a pathological addiction or it's just a normal surfing, right? It's a question. So anything pathological is when it is affecting your personal, social, and occupational life of functioning. So if social media restricts you from your personal hygiene, maintaining your personal hygiene, you cannot do anything, you cannot eat food, you cannot take bath because of that, Okay, it hampering your social life, like your friends, your families are there and you cannot interact with them. And finally, occupation, that for you doing any, fulfilling any duties, anything, if hampering it significantly, then definitely your parents are right that you are having addiction. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Shannon. Those of you who asked questions. Thank you, VC sir, for sitting through this and keeping me in line with the time. I would now like to invite Adrita back on the stage, if you would, so that we can conclude this afternoon with the felicitations and the other activities. Thank you, everybody, for this opportunity. As Cassie said, you said you're going to hang around if you all can stay. If the students want to come back and talk a little bit more, let's keep the conversation going. This is what it's about. Thank you, Adrita.
Also, a huge shout out to Adrita Roy, who has done an absolutely amazing job of coordinating all of this. Without her, this would not have been possible. So thank you, Adrita.
Indeed.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cassie. It was such an enriching session. And when you work in a niche interest, it's very rare to find conversations around your topic. And this was a delight for me because I've been working on this area for 4 years now. As we approach the end of today's enriching session, I would like VC sir to felicitate. If you could, sir, if it's not too much of a bother, I would request you to come. Sir, also, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Miss Catherine Marple. Professor Dr. Ananda Mitro. Sir. Sir. Natsukavai. Miss Natsukavai. Mr. Ken Kavai. Mr. Ken Kavai. Dr. Ananda Mitra, sir. Sir, please. And Dr. Anindita Mukherjee, ma'am.
Request Buroshiv Dashgupta sir, Professor Buroshiv Dashgupta sir, please conclude the session, sir, for us. Please. Please, sir. Please come.
Well, am I audible? Uh, this is such an excellent experience. I'm sure this has been something very unique. Uh, Actually, we were not expecting this to happen. I mean, Cassie was talking about relationships, but what we saw today, the relationships at different levels. The relationship between, say, countries, USA, India, Japan, relationship between institutes, State, Michigan State University, SNU, and I'm not too sure about the Japanese institutes. Yeah, okay. So we saw so many levels of relationship, and also another thing which we saw is the relationship between psychology and media, which we are not really used to discuss, but which is very important. You might be knowing that today psychology is entering into almost major sciences. In fact, economics is now moving from the mathematical models to the psychological structures, mental frameworks. So I think if this is the future, if what Cassie was saying, her university is also exploring ideas of measuring, feeling, measuring emotions, could be the beginning of these collaborations between the universities, between these subjects, the relationships which we saw. Because there is a question of re-evaluation that needs to be done, even for the media. For example, our Japanese friend, Ken, was talking about anima, and he made it very clear that media is not just for fun. It is for serious studies, and which is important. I mean, we saw a lot of things which the relationship between, say, psychology, the mental frames, and the kind of research which Nivedita has been doing and Cassie has been doing, which will lead to, say, creating more, say, meaningful content, not the mindless content which some of you have been saying that with social media has been creating. So these serious studies will definitely lead to a new definition maybe of media and to some extent psychology as well. Thank you very much for coming up and being a participant of this. Thank you.
And we conclude the session. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming.